So today's session, your first 24 hours in views. Hopefully it doesn't take me 24 hours to go through this because they'll have to yank me off the stage. That would be bad. This is mainly a beginner course. May not even have knowledge of how Drupal works. We'll try to bridge those bounds if we need to. Definitely need to have looked at the views interface before to understand. We'll go through the various portions of the interface as we describe views. Who am I? I'm Chris Panza. My Drupal handle is just_Chris. I've been using Drupal professionally since 2010. Really enjoy various portions of Drupal. One of the portions I really like is views because it's so much fun sometimes. Right now, I'm currently at HS2 Solutions, which we are a digital marketing agency in Chicago. We're actually not too far from here. Well, one of our offices is not too far from here in Ravenswood. We have a good presence in this current camp. We're sponsoring it. We have a booth if you need to talk to us. We have a couple of speakers, as well as various training programs. So come out and talk to us if you want. My Twitter handle is asharpzinc if you need to contact me or get a hold of me after the session. So what we're going to cover today about views. First, what is it? Information about the interface itself and the various portions of it. Which content to display, how the content looks, what about the content, various abilities to sort and order it, and as well as little helpers here and there to make your output a little more dynamic. So first off, what is views? The most common response that I see is it's a query builder. So normally you're dealing with content in which you want to display, and normally you would do something like write a bunch of SQL queries to get that data out and then display in a certain fashion. This really provides a good UI to get all around that, not having to worry about the coding of SQL to get your data in the right format. What I really like about it really is a good UI for rapid prototyping. What that means is you can quickly run through a bunch of iterations on how you want your output to display without having to spend too much time. You can change the way things are ordered, the way things look, just with a few clicks, which is really kind of neat. It doesn't take, days upon days to change output. And like I said, it's just plain fun most of the times. There are times when, of course, it's a pain, but it really is fun to use, at least in my mind. I equivalent it to using Legos, these kind of building blocks where you snap this in place and snap this in place, and in the end, get this really cool output. So very, very basic how we get there. This is going to be referencing it when using Drupal 8. Most of what I'm about to say also applies for Drupal 7. The interface hasn't changed too much. There's very, very slight tweaks between 7 and 8. But most of what we're going to cover, nothing changes. The one big difference in Drupal 7, you have to download views as a separate module. Drupal 8 comes as part of its course. So if you have Drupal 8 downloaded and installed, you don't need to do anything additional to cover pretty much anything we're going to cover here. I will point out some additional modules you can get to make the experience a little better and a little cool, but no additional work besides getting Drupal 8 installed is necessary. It's attained by logging into your administration and clicking on structure. From there, there's a long list of items in structure, and at the very bottom, there's an item called views, which is obviously what we're looking for. When we do that, we're presented with a nice display of all the existing views on the site. So when you install Drupal 8, a lot of the interfaces in the background definitely use views already. So, and as we move along in Drupal development, more and more have become actual views. So without even actually creating anything, there are a bunch of views already created on the site. So you can edit to browse somehow these are configured. You can take a look as well to get an understanding of how some are set up, and that's a great way to go about it. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to go from scratch and build from there. So we're going to click on Add View, which is the case we're most likely going to run to. You have some content and you want to display in a certain way. So we're going to click on Add View to actually do that. So now we're going to actually start looking at the views interface. The one warning is you may end up spending a lot of time in this interface. I've worked projects in the past where I've spent days in this interface just changing the way things are formatted, creating a bunch of different views to create the outputs needed. So if you are using this stuff as a site builder a lot, you may end up spending a lot of time here. So get comfortable with it and get used to what's available to you. When you do click Add View, you're presented with this sort of wizard interface. Basically, for administration purposes, you give it a name, and then you start to define information about what you're presenting. So the first thing there under View Settings is what you're showing. So it's by default it comes up as content. So in Drupal world, there's a different number of what we call entities, and that describes how the fields on a piece of content are formatted. So content is one of the more basic ones because it includes your basic page and articles out of the box, and usually is one of the things you end up extending the most as content. But there are other options there, which are something like users, which have a different use and field, and also comments. For this purpose, we're going to start out with just content. We also define which content type. So within Drupal, for each content, you can define specific content types, which define how your fields are structured. Article is one of the basic ones that come out of the box, so we're just going to work on that. You see two options also below it where you can automatically create a page or a block as you go. We could also add these options later on, and that's actually what we're going to do in this case. Basically what this wizard does is it sets up some of your basic settings without you having to start completely from scratch, but we're also going to show some of those options as well. So this is really the main views interface without anything really being entered. This is kind of default whenever you create a view. There's not much filled out. We're going to go through the various important sections of this one by one to describe what they do and then how they can affect your output. So at the very top, there are displays. So displays are how, in a large scale, how the item is shown. When we click on Add, we have a bunch of different options here. The two main ones that you'll probably use the most are page and block. The difference between a page and a block is the page is an individually loadable item. So it has a URL path which you can load. Block is something that may sit on a page. So it may sit in the sidebar of a page. Those are the two main. There are other ones. Feed is something like if you're creating an RSS feed, that's a great way to have a specific format that is available to feed readers. In this case, we're going to start by looking at a page display. One note, when we do select to add a page, a URL is required for the page. It won't let you save or view your output without actually entering the URL. So we are creating a page called Cute Cuddly. You can kind of get a feel for where this is going and what we're going to be seeing in this demonstration. So I've created some test content on a site, some cute kitten and puppy pictures. So by default, this is our output. We have it at the Cute Cuddly location, just a simple run out of what are actually the titles for the individual pieces of content. Not too much to it, but it's something loads pretty much right off the bat once you hit save. Block is a little different, so we're going to add a block in this case. We see a lot of the same, or all the same options, except that in the middle of the screen towards the top there's an area called block settings instead of the page settings, which we defined the URL in. So once we add a block and save it, we can place the block someplace, and we're going to run over to the block interface to actually place it. Basically, it provides a number of different regions where you can place such blocks, and then you select the area, and the one that we're looking at right in here is MidCamp demo. And we do that. We see that there is that same sort of list along the left-hand side of just titles, and this is while viewing another page. This is a specific page about one of the images we're displaying. So, kind of difference between block and page, you know, individually loadable versus something that exists on a page. So, start to get into what we're actually showing when we want to display these outputs. We saw what we just saw were just a run-out of titles, and we can see by default the settings have under fields, it has the content title field. So that's describing what exactly we're showing about the content. Up top, right above it, the area we also concerned about are, it says show fields. This says that we can define which fields we want to show. There's a couple other options, or there's one other main option that we'll get into in a second. But if we click on add a field, we can select from the various fields we have available in our content management system to display what we need. So basically you just check them off as you go. In this case, we're going to bring in the image on the article, information about the image author or photographer, and then the date in which it's uploaded. So we're going to add those specific items to each individual output. For each content that we're displaying, we're going to pull those fields in. When you select one of them and you hit save, you're presented with a large number of options. This is referring to the image itself. So we have a concept of a formatter, how the image is displayed, as well as image style, which kind of gives a predefined style in which or size that it would output. A lot of this, you can override the output in a certain fashion. You can apply various CSS styles or HTML elements without really even having to code anything manually. You just, if you want to wrap it in a certain paragraph or a certain div with a certain class, you can rewrite the results or change the style settings below. There's a ton of options here. I don't have time to go into all of them, but for each one of these fields that we select, we have the ability to configure them exactly how we need. So if we need to add more information about it, we can do that via the settings. So each one of those that we selected, we'd have a box where I'm not going to run through all of them, but in the upper right you see there's one of three, so we'll have three individual screens that we have to provide settings for. You can start out with leaving out defaults and seeing what it looks like when you do that. So we see that under our fields, our list has grown quite a bit. We originally just had content title. Now we have content image and the image author and the upload date. So those individual fields have been added to the output. This is kind of a preview on how it looks. So if you had the previous screen and you scroll down further past the save button, views by default shows a preview of your results. So this isn't a fully styled result set, but you see the items that we just defined. We had the title that was existing, we have a certain size for the image, and then we have the information about the author and upload date. You can sort of see how this is starting to add information about the individual piece of content. Alternatively, we can use the content setting under show. So if you click on that fields link that we had previously next to show under format, one of the other options is content. The difference here is that, well, one of the differences, as soon as we switch it, we'll note that there is no longer a bunch of lists for fields. You can't really add anything there, and it says it doesn't apply. So those options are hidden, not removed in this case. If you switch it back to fields, the fields that you had defined previously will show back up, so they're not deleted, but they are kind of hidden because they don't really apply in this case. What it does apply is we have this concept in Drupal of view modes. View modes are awesome because they are completely reusable concept throughout the entire Drupal site. So if you end up in a scenario where you have this content, let's say this picture of furry animals, where we display them in a number of different locations, not just in views. If we're using something like panels to display the output, and we can, in those specific panels, we can say we just want to pull in this content, and how do we want to format it? We can do that by defining the view mode which it would display. So teaser is one example of a view mode, full is another example of a display mode. It basically kind of defines everything we saw in that fields runout, but does it associate to the content type instead of the individual view. So basically what I'm saying is it abstracts a little bit past out views. So as you define those fields in views, you can't really reuse that anywhere outside of views. You can't reuse how you define that outside of views because it's really inherent in the views itself. But using these view modes, you can reuse them outside in other systems of Drupal. When I started out, I was all about fields because I love that control. I love the ability to, really customize each individual display. But as I worked more with it, I definitely moved more towards using content because really that reusability and saving work is really awesome. So, like I said before, it's hidden in this case. So now we're going to talk about how it looks in general, the output. There's a bunch of different options that we're going to look at. We're going to look at mainly the format section, and we're also going to discuss a little bit about pagers because both of those affect how you see the content. So when you click on unformatted list in this case, it allows you to change the view styles. So by default, these are the view styles that are available to you when you download Drupal 8. Grid, HTML list, table, and formatted list. The unformatted list is the pre-selected option, but we can select different ones and see how that output looks without having to really change any other settings besides this option here. So grid style displays in the grid. It allows you to define how many columns in the grid. So not completely formatted, but you can see it's a 4-column grid here, and then we keep running the rows down until we've exhausted the content. HTML list style, both ordered and unordered lists, basically just runs out the content that we display in the fields in such lists. Table style is kind of cool. Creates an HTML table for you. This is great for administration views because you can really show the administrator all the content, but it's also definitely useful on the front end. It uses the title for the field as the title, as the header column or header row. Pager options, so by default it's set to this mini pager. There's also a full pager available. So we'll see that in a second. Just looking at the settings for the pager, it allows us to define number of items per page. This was previously 10. We dropped it back to 5. So you can say how many items are on the page, and it'll calculate how many pages there are based upon that. Again, stuff that if you were writing a SQL query, it might take a little extra time to actually define stuff like offset and other items. You can also define the text that appears as the links in the pager. The difference between a mini pager and a full pager. So obviously mini just is a shorthand version, whereas full kind of gives you the idea of how many pages there are, allows you to go to the last, the first, and next and previous, all in one area. You can also use the 2 other options here to display a certain number of items. So if you wanted to display 5 and then that's it, you can say that. If your output is the 3 latest blog posts, you can say that I want 3 blog posts and then that's it. Or you can display all items, which can get long depending on how many pieces of content you're associating with these views. Any questions so far before we move into the next session?
I had a question, but I hope this is not off topic.
Nothing's off topic.
You mentioned that with fields you have the ability to customize the way you want to customize the view. I was wondering, like, if you switch from fields to content and use teaser to show that, how do you customize that?
So, and let me pop out and quickly try to actually demonstrate that. So, let me get to the right. No, I do not want to dictation. So, this is the demo site in which we're creating. So, if we go to structure and content types, those are the content types that are defined on this site itself. So we were working with article in that example. So if we go, instead of manage fields, because manage fields will manage what is actually associated to it. If we go to manage display, you'll see all the fields that have been added to the content type. So we can define which ones show, what the label is and what the format is. For if you're asking specifically about overwriting it,
yes,
that might be a little bit extra work. Usually you might do that in a template specifically, because you can assign a template to a view mode. You can assign a template to a view mode on a specific content type. And then you can wrap it in HTML or do PHP processing on it if you need to. But a lot of those individual options that you have on the view fields, you don't have this by default. Perhaps there are some plugins that allow you to do some of that stuff, but not to the flexibility that Views has. Views is really flexible in altering the content.
So there's something where you could go and click on information for, and then there's a theme again. It has options like row, style, and those things. You cannot take one of those PHP files.
Not entirely. You can do it in a number of ways. Getting into some of the other systems like paragraphs is one of the systems that allow you a little better flexibility of individual pieces of content, and allows you some of that interface, but not kind of at that field level the same. Not that I'm aware of.
All right, thanks.
Anything else before we continue? Okay. So this is one of the topics of views I love the most is filtering, because it really allows you to create outputs which are really dynamic. Gives control to various either administrators, visitors. So the 2 areas that we'll look at here, and there's actually a third area. 2 areas that we'll look at is filter criteria, and as well as contextual filters. We'll also dive a little bit into relationships as we're doing it, because it's going to be somewhat related to the example we're using. So by default, the filter criteria was pretty short, basically just showing published nodes. So each node has, or piece of content has the ability to be published or unpublished. So we only want to show content which is published in this case. Like fields, we can add individual filter criterias. And when we click on that, we're provided with a similar list as fields. Pretty long list. You can, in this display, you can search for a specific field if you know its name. You can filter the category, which is usually the content user, to find what you want to instead of scrolling or using the in-browser search. But a lot of the same fields that we saw when we were adding fields are available as filters. And same thing, we select a checkbox next to one of them, and then we hit add. So in this case, we're going to filter by a tag or a taxonomy term. So Drupal comes with the ability to define taxonomy terms, which is a way of tagging or categorizing content. So in our case, we have kittens and puppies. So maybe we have a vocabulary of different types of baby animals, and then we define kittens and puppies as the terms on that vocabulary. And when we assign that to the individual piece of content, we can now filter by it. So in this case, we're going to select tags and ask which of vocabulary we're using. We're actually using the default tags vocabulary in this case. When we do that, it shows us all the terms on the vocabulary. So we just have to, like we said, kittens and puppies. So when we're doing this, we can, as the administrator, select which one we want to show in this output. So we're going to select kittens in this display, and then when we look at the output, we only have kittens. Now this is, again, we're defining this as the administrator. We aren't allowing any flexibility. We want to only show kittens, so likely we're going to say this page is kittens. Extending that a little further, we can expose this filter to the site visitors themselves. So we can say, these are your options of what you might want to see, and you can select which one you do want to see. So we do this by simply selecting the expose this filter option at the top, and then the options kind of change a little bit. We can define the label, which appears above, in this case, the select box. We have operators where you can kind of do inverse, where it's not one of the ones you selected. Those are also options. Most common use case is to just say is one of, because that says whatever I'm selecting is whatever the user is selecting or the site visitor is selecting is what we will show. So bringing that to how that actually displays on the page, they now get a handy dandy select box for what they want to see. The default for it is any, so we see that both kittens and puppies are shown. But if they want to just show puppies, the site visitor comes in and selects puppies themselves, clicks apply, and then the view is updated to only show puppies. So this kind of changes the control of what you want to see to the user. And this is a kind of what you see in most interfaces on the web, where you have your shopping cart where the user just wants to see shirts or pants or color red of items, or this is the basis of it, at least in building them out with views. And it's perfectly reasonable to create a shopping cart in the same fashion where you can provide one filter, you can provide multiple filters. So I can have puppies that are brown, puppies that are black, puppies that are large, where small, medium, and large might be either terms, taxonomy terms, or maybe another piece of content, as well as color might be a different taxonomy term. And then we could have multiple select boxes to show all those different options, and the user can select the different options similar to how you see on a shopping cart, hit apply, and see the results that they're inspecting. So kind of flips and allows the user to see what they want instead of you defining what you want them to see. Contextual filters are a little bit similar, but more defined on how you want your site structure. So think of contextual filters as page arguments. I believe in a previous version of Views it was actually called arguments, but the wording is slightly changed. But basically, it allows you to create URLs which reference what you're filtering by in the URL and have it load correctly. We're going to briefly do an excursion into relationships at this point because it's relevant for what we're doing. So what we're trying to set up here is the ability to provide kittens as part of the URL and have it load as just kittens. The problem that we have is the information that's stored on the piece of content, the article that is the picture of the kitten or the puppy, only has the taxonomy ID. So the number in the database for which term ID it is. It doesn't actually have the name of the term associated directly with the the content, the puppy, the cat picture. So we have to say that we want to grab additional information from somewhere else. The somewhere else is we want to grab the additional information from the taxonomy term. So we had a relationship saying, I have taxonomy term ID 1, I want to know its name. So that's what this relationship does, and this is specifically the one we're selecting. It makes sense because the field that we've added to, or the field that's on the article content type is called field tags. So we're getting the entire node, or the entire taxonomy term that's assigned. Other use cases for relationships is, let's say you have a blog and you have articles that are written by various people on your staff or client staff. And when we create those articles, we select which author created it. That's all fine and dandy, but the information we only have is usually which author, either a user ID or a content node, which may be 1, 2, 3. Maybe it's their name, but maybe we want some information further from that node. Maybe we want information about the author's hobbies, and we want to display that in the output along with the blog post. You're going to have to set up a relationship to do that, because you're going to have to say, well, give me additional information about this author, which isn't the primary thing we're looking at. We're looking at that blog post, but I need additional information about the author so that I can display it in this output. So you may use it in fields, because you may display it as a field. You may use it as a filter. You may use it as a contextual filter. Basically, it's the friends of the content, which content is associated with the content you're looking at. Once we do that, once we add that relationship, then we can select a contextual filter called name, which is associated the taxonomy term name, which is exactly what we want to filter by. We have some options once we do this. Basically describes the behavior of when arguments exist and don't, and whether or not, if the user puts in an argument into URL, if it's a valid argument. So in our case, we specify validation criteria, which means that we say, get me the taxonomy term name that is being entered in the URL. Make sure that it's actually a term in the tag's vocabulary. If it's not, do this behavior. So we've selected, if it's not in there, do page not found. This is different from what we saw right above, which is the same in the same option window, whether or not a value is in the URL at all, what we do there. So the way we have this set up right now is if we just put in cute cuddly, then it would show all. If we put cute cuddly and something else, it would validate it against the specific tags that are, or terms that are available on the vocabulary which we're selecting. So how that looks, we now have a path called cute cuddly / kittens. Note I'm using the uppercase kittens because I didn't select a different option on the previous where you could I believe there's an option to transform case. We could transform the case so we can enter a lowercase URL as well. So that's kittens. Of course, we can do the reverse. We can select cute cuddly puppies. And then the final option is if we entered a URL of cute cuddly / kids, even though kids aren't cute and cuddly, we don't have that as a term. So this behavior says, as per what we've selected, page not found. So you can use this option in a number of ways. This can refer to dates, number ranges, etc. So it validates what is being entered and provides an output based upon that. So if you want to make sure that the user can't just enter cute cuddly and 1 and they get some results, you specify the validation criteria. Ordering content, this is just one section we're looking at, the sort criteria. This is one of the more straightforward sections of the interface because by default, as we saw previously, by default there's this kind of order which we didn't even understand. Let's go back to a previous view. There really isn't any apparent ordering to here. It's not date, it's not title. You can't order by picture if it doesn't make sense. It's probably by time the content was actually created, maybe, who knows. So that's without anything selected as sort criteria. So it kind of just goes with Drupal's default, which I believe is creation date and time. But we can do something like simple like sort by title. Now we can see that the individual items are sorted by title alphabetically. We can do ascending, descending, of course. This is ascending in this case. We can switch over to sort by the date in which it's uploaded. So we can sort by dates as well. We can sort by various numbers. And you can now see that they are sorted by date. Some cool little helpers to kind of update the display. This section we look at header, footer, and the no results behavior. So if you select the add button next to the header, you're presented with a number of options. These are going to be different than what we've seen before with fields, filters, and sort criteria because they don't operate on the fields themselves. These are kind of more, as the category explains, global options. One that we're going to use is result summary, which is a handy little widget which provides information about the output. So we're going to display what number we're starting at, how many there are, and what number we're ending at. This is the default configuration, so I didn't have to do anything. You can obviously change the text around or use some of the additional more token options that we see here. If we added no results option, we can provide text. We could provide one of the other options, but text is a good example, and we're doing something similar for the footer as well. With that updated section, we have a no results behavior text, a footer of a different text, and that header, which was the results summary that we saw. How that looks for the header and footer, we're displaying 1 to 6 of 6 items, and then we've also placed a little footer text at the bottom that says all images retrieved from Media Commons, which is where all these images were retrieved from. No results behavior, we changed this a little bit. We provided instead of in the validation criteria, instead of saying do a page not found, we said we changed the settings to display the no results text, which we've defined here. None found here, simple enough. Some additional add-on modules to really kind of do really cool stuff, in my opinion. First is draggable views. What that allows you to do, and this is mainly really useful for the creating views for administrators, allows you to order content, sort content by actually physically dragging instead of defining this is first, this is second, this is third. It provides a draggable handle that we've probably seen elsewhere in Drupal and allows you to drag in the order that you want and then hit save, and it saves that order correctly. Calendar sounds exactly like it is. If you have date-based items, calendar is really useful because it could display a month calendar, a year calendar, I believe a weekly calendar of various stuff. Useful for events, of course. If you have a site which deals mainly with events, that's a useful option. View slideshow, getting into image carousels. This module pre-configures a lot of those sliding carousels if you have image-based content without having to find the JS library and kind of implementing it yourself. Quick word on debugging. If you understand SQL at all, there's a good option in the view settings to show the SQL query. So if we, it's at the very bottom of live preview settings. If we turn that on, when you hit preview, you actually get the SQL for whatever view we're outputting. So some people understand what's going on here, some people don't. The fields are usually very long that it's referencing, that's why it's sometimes hard to read. But you can probably, if you understand SQL, you can debug some of it here.
Can you edit that SQL or no?
No.
Oh, okay.
You can copy it and use your own SQL editor, but then you have to probably change something right here where it says node field data. That probably has to be altered slightly, but no. Getting help if you're stuck or need to learn more. Some resources. There's a course documentation about this specific to Drupal 8. There are some great books about it. Both, like I said, Drupal 8 and Drupal 7 kind of function the same way for views, so applies. There's tons of blog posts, tons of videos out there. If you prefer to seek individual help, ask your peers. There are a number of methods to do that. IRC, how to sign up for IRC. There's a Drupal Slack. If you prefer local, there's a Drupal Chicago Slack. And of course, there's Stack Exchange if you want to look for questions or create your own. Reminder that Sunday, sprint, awesome stuff. I love sprinting. It's in this building, I believe the other rooms. Code, documentation, any other help, please help out. Drupal needs to keep on growing information on the site. That's the feedback link. If you have any questions for me later on, you can capture me on Twitter or Drupal.org. That's my RC and Slack handle too. Any questions? Sure.
You went to the Drupal page for configuring your view to select kittens or puppies,
Right.
which is harder than a lot of people would want to deal, harder than a lot of end users. How hard is it to put on your web page a radio button or pull down list that says kittens, puppies, or both, and we feed that in?
We kind of did that with exposed filters. We kind of did that. Have to get to the right spot. Kind of did that. Is that what you're referring to? Because this is the front end of the site. So this is what the
Right.
visitor sees. So that was, instead of us defining the filter itself, we said expose this filter to the site visitor.
Yeah, don't want to miss that one.
Okay.
Is it also easy to put a search string?
Yeah, you can use.
Kittens or puppies, and if you don't say
This isn't just select boxes. It can be text. You can search for content in. You have to be careful with text, obviously, because matching isn't always 100%. So
Right.
it contains. But yeah, if you're searching based or filtering based upon text field, you have options for substrings, etc.
Can you create a view and export it as a Word document?
What kind of Word doc? What do you want the Word document to represent?
Like when I have people fill out a form and then add stuff to it and create a Word document in Microsoft Word.
Form is better for something like web form, or contact forms are better for capturing form entry than views is. Views is to get data out, whereas something like web forms is to put data in. So if you try to capture from people,
Well, not necessarily. I want to describe that way. I want to take a view and export it and save it in a Word document. Create a Word document out of views.
yeah, I'm not sure what exactly you're having the Word document actually do.
You
I
want
mean,
an
you can
application?
export the output to something like a PDF and stuff like that. There are different styles to do that, and I'm not sure if Word document is really an option.
Can you export as a PDF from Drupal, or you just have to use a web browser to print to PDF?
It's really getting back to the view styles. We saw a few short examples of them. There are more of them, and some of them, it's a similar push to feeds where you're defining a very custom output. So somebody may have written a module which has a custom defined output already that you can reuse. So PDF might be an example of that. I'm not sure about.
Yeah, I believe there is an add-on for exporting of views into a PDF.
Yeah, I'm not sure about a Word document though, but perhaps something that could be worked on. Any other questions? If not, come and see me afterwards if you want to talk personally. Thank you.